guys, and welcome back to the Carolina Custom Guitars Ibanez build part 2. I'm Ben.
I'm Danny.
And we're going to do this one more time, a little bit more in depth than the last video, and we'll see how it goes. How about it?
I guess it's okay with me.
I'm okay with it.
How about it?
We're going to do this one more time on the neck, and the hardware, fit and finish, and then we're going to do a test on how it sounds.
And we're going to let you get the guitar in a mix.
What he said. Let's go. Okay, these are my fret pulling pliers, and we're going to pull the frets out as gently as possible. Last time I did this, I used a pocket knife that I had on me and just sort of pried up the frets a little bit. Make sure you're pretty gentle with it, because you can pull up some of the wood and leave large chips that can't be covered up by the new fret wire. We were lucky. I mean, this fretboard was pretty dry and poor shape, but once we pulled them up, it was only small chips, so they were able to be covered up by the new fret wire. So that worked out okay. Just I've seen some people will take a hot soldering iron and just run it across the top of the frets to sort of heat up the glue, and it sort of dissolves it, I guess, and makes it a little bit easier to pull out. We didn't really have that problem, so I just went with what we were doing. But whatever works for you, try it. You know, I'm not against it. Just didn't happen to need that. It came out pretty easy, so whatever. And once I get all these frets out, I'm gonna do a light sanding on it. You know, some fine sandpaper, somewhere around 800 to 1000 grit, just to knock down some of the sharp edges. Not coarse enough to scar up the inlays on there, but you know, enough to show a little progress. I also wanted to brighten up the binding a little bit, because it was pretty dingy. Like I say, it's been sitting around for a while, been well used. It's kind of had a yellow color to it, so this sort of brought the white back out, and sort of polished up the fretboard a little bit. We'll go back and refinish it. Now on the fret wire, it's got a tang on the bottom. You can see that. When it's a bound fretboard like that, the binding sort of goes in about 1/8 of an inch into the fretboard. So you're going to need to nibble away some of that tang off the fret wire to about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, to let it sit inside there. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just enough. Then set it on one edge and take your cutters, whatever you're using. They make nibblers for these things or whatever. They make all kinds of specialty tools. I'm cheap. So I took a pair of side cutters, marked it. You know, give yourself a little bit of play in there. You know, don't do it flush, because you're going to knock all that down anyway. Cut it the length and nibble some of that tang off a little bit more for the other side. And I found out later on while doing this that I could just file the tang off instead of nibbling it and then filing it. Just make sure it's flush, so it sits flush on top of that binding. And it should fit fine. If you cut it too small, then you're going to have to redo it. If you cut it too big, you can always move it up the fretboard and where the neck gets wider, and find where it fits the best. I used wood glue on this just because I couldn't figure out a good way to get super glue down in there without getting it all over the top of the fretboard. This way I could just run it across the top of that groove and put the fret in there and mash it down inside, and then wipe the excess away with a damp paper towel. When I do it, I'm just using a fret hammer. You can buy a fret press. It's like a pair of vice grips to press it down in there and hold it for a few seconds till it's good. But that's an awesome tool if you want to pay the money for it. They're expensive through like StewMac. This was like $10. And make sure that your radius is a little bit smaller on the fret wire, so that you have a high point in the middle, So when you knock it down into the fretboard, the outside edges level out first. If you don't do that, if it doesn't have enough curve to it, you'll have the edges sort of pop up a little bit high, and it's almost impossible to knock those down flush. It's better to go ahead and have a tighter radius turned right off the bat. These came at like a 10-inch or 8-inch radius. I don't know what it was, but it worked out, so I didn't have to do any work. Stainless steel frets are very tough to work with, but totally worth it in my opinion. And the next thing I did was just take a permanent marker and mark the top of the frets. That way when I go to file them down to do a fret leveling, once all the marking is gone off the top of the fret, you know that they've all been hit by the file at the same time. And that way you know the level. Just a small line across the top. And then my little custom made fret leveler, it's a Husky level. Paid a couple bucks at Home Depot for it, put some double-sided tape on one end and took some sandpaper, I don't know what it was, 400 or 600 grit, something like that, stuck it to the other side and just let the sandpaper do the work. Don't press too hard and just run it till all the marking's gone. Once you get above the 12th fret or so, you want to do a little bit more of an angle to put more relief towards the higher end of the neck. Trust me, you'll appreciate that later when you go to play on it. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. Everyone does that. I'm not cheating, I promise. It took a little bit longer than it should have. But my next little tool I made, it's my fret beveling tool. Just took a router and set it to 30 degrees and did a little plunge cut across the top so it fit my cheap file set perfectly in there, nice and snug, and it gives me 30 degrees on the end. Just run it across till you get a 30-degree bevel on the end of each of the frets. Looks like a 2x4, at least for stainless steel. It's soft enough to where it doesn't mar up the frets. Make sure you're careful once you get up towards the headstock up there. On my other guitar that I did, I kind of jammed it into the headstock there. So just, if you're not comfortable with it, wrap it up in some tape or something to protect it. But it doesn't take too terribly long like this. You can buy the tool from Stu Mac. It's like 50 bucks or something. Then once you get that done, come back with a little hand file and knock down all the sharp edges, because it's still going to be kind of sharp once you do that. I like to have a nice rounded bullet tip to it, so I take my time. It takes a little while, but get a good angle on it and use your other finger to sort of guide the file, because you don't want to gouge the binding or anything, or the neck if you don't have the binding. Either way. And take your time. Work it all the way down. Next step is I'm just going to polish the fretboard up a little bit more. I've got some teak oil. A buddy of mine, Brian, gave me a bottle of it. This stuff works like gangbusters. Put it on there, let it dry, and it sort of soaks into all the cracks and almost hardens like it's got a resin in it or something. I'm not terribly sure about that, but it kind of hardens it. It actually works great, so I'm going to use that on all my guitars, at least the rosewood ones for now. Next part I sped up quite a bit, because surely you can figure out how to put the hardware on. It's just bolt-in stuff, especially if you get like the tuner upgrade kits like this one from Hipshot. It's got the little brackets on the back. Holds the tuners in place so you don't have to drill holes to mount them on the back of the headstock. New locking nut came with the Floyd Rose, and the string retainer came with it too. If you buy the kit, it comes with everything: the nut, the string retainer, screws, everything you need. And that's all there is to the neck, really. And then moving on, we're going to get to the body. We're going to put the studs in for the Floyd. This is where we found out that we didn't get all of the foam out that this guitar was filled with. So all the threads were really tight. We had to back them back out, try to clean it out, and then put them back in. That's why he's got the flashlight out, trying to get them clean, so the studs move freely in there, because you always want to be able to adjust that Floyd up and down to get your action right. Then we're going to fit the wiring harness in. Came with two 500K pots. It's the Steve Vai setup from 920D, which is really nice stuff, but we ran into some issues. For whatever reason, it was made for an RG, and this is an RG Ibanez. The holes were too small, so we had to drill them out a little bit wider to get the post to fit through from the pots. And that was just part of the issue we had. Looking back now, we should have just bought two 500K pots and a resistor, and then a 5-way switch, and just done it from scratch. We would have saved ourselves all kinds of trouble. The cost would have been about the same, but we wouldn't have had the hassle that we had, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But once we get these fit in there, then come find out that the gold knobs that we bought for the guitar, for whatever reason, the posts on those 500K pots were larger, so knobs wouldn't fit on. They're just the press-on style with the plastic inserts. So we had to take them back out and drill them out with the drill, and they still fit snug on there. We're going to go back and order some more that have a set screw in them, and that should work a little bit better. But once we tried to push the knobs on like they were, it pushed the post back into the pots and busted the pots, so we had to put the pots back together, which was a nightmare. Like I say, the whole thing, just one thing after another, and this is where we're messing around with that. When the jack was easy, of course. 2 wires soldered that up. That of course, that was the easiest part. So taking pliers, squeezing them back together, and yeah, that was do your due diligence next time. If it was me, I'm going to go by and check the size of everything as I'm doing it before I go trying to press something on with force. And then we're putting in the pickups. We got the Liquifier, the Crunch Lab, and the True Velvet in the middle. It's kind of like the John Petrucci pickup set with an added True Velvet in the middle. A few people play the True Velvet. When we were thinking about what's a good middle pickup to buy, all of our guitars for the most part are 2 humbucker or all single coil, so we weren't sure. And then I thought about it. I saw an interview with Nita Strauss one time, and she said she used the True Velvet in the middle just because she liked the creaminess of it. So we figured we'd give it a shot, and it turned out pretty good. I like the sound of it. The whole setup's pretty good. Just got to get your settings right. And then here we are with the wiring, and there was some issue with getting the middle pickup to work right. It was just one of those problems that would not resolve itself. We were going back and forth, wiring it, rewiring it, looking at the instructions, getting on our smartphones, looking at the 920D wiring diagram to see what we're missing. And it turns out there was some issue with one of the wires that went from the ground on the volume pot back to one of the terminals on the tone pot. And I can't say if it was supposed to be like that, if it was something we did wrong. There was nothing wrong with 920D. I'm sure they did it right. It's just we had something configured differently. Once I got that wire off, it worked like a champ. That was just one of those funny things that you scratch your head over for hours. But we ended up getting it. It worked out in the end. It was just a little bit of a headache for a little bit. There's me trying to read, and Danny showing me how a smartphone works. And we figured those 2 things out. But the only way to really find out what the problem was trial and error. Take this wire loose, put this wire on, testing, retesting. Finally we got it, and worked out okay. I did hook the ground up to the claw for the trim system, and that's the way I've always done it, so wherever you like. Reassemble, and then colored the heads of those screws with a permanent marker, just because we didn't buy extra screws for the neck, whatever. And put the Floyd in, and there's a picture of the finished product. I guess next is see how it sounds. Alright, 1 step left. How about we see what it sounds like in a mix? Are you ready? He's ready. All right. Well, I had fun. I don't know about you, but if you want to see more, leave it in the comments below. If you liked it, please subscribe. Give us some feedback. We appreciate y'all hanging in there. All right. Y'all have a good one. My dog ran away. He'll be back. You watch. Look, he's back. He's back. He made it back.